The eviction notice was still crumpled in my jacket pocket when I pulled into the gravel lot of Cascade Mountain Outfitters. 3 months overdue on rent, medical bills from the VA stacking up like accusations on my kitchen table, and my last employer's polite but firm suggestion that I take some time to work through my issues. That's what brought me to this godforsaken corner of the Washington Cascades. I'm Jake Morrison, 32 years old, former Army Ranger turned professional disappointment. 2 tours in Afghanistan, a Purple Heart I never wear, and enough psychological baggage to fill a cargo plane. The PTSD counselor said I needed structure and purpose in a low-stress environment. Apparently, guiding rich city folks through mountain hunting expeditions qualified as low stress shows what the VA knows. The job posting had been almost too good to be true. $800 a day plus tips, room and board provided, experience with firearms required. Remote mountain hunting guide needed immediately. Discretion essential. Ask no questions. Follow all protocols. The last part should have been a red flag, but when you're facing homelessness, red flags start looking like Christmas decorations. The main lodge squatted against the tree line like something out of a horror movie. All dark wood and narrow windows that seemed to watch you approach. My pickup truck's engine ticked in the sudden silence as I shut it off, the sound unnaturally loud in the mountain stillness. The air up here was thin and sharp, carrying scents of pine sap and something else, something organic and slightly rotten that I couldn't identify. You Morrison? I turned to find a man emerging from the lodge's shadow, mid-50s weathered face mapped with lines that spoke of decades in harsh conditions. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that careless steps could be fatal. His eyes, pale blue and constantly moving, never quite met mine directly. "That's me," I said, extending a hand. "Jake Morrison." He looked at my hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. His grip was firm but cold, even through worn leather gloves. "Marcus Valdez. I run operations here. You read the posting carefully?" "Every word." "Good, because we're going to go over it again, plus about 50 other things they don't put in job postings." He turned toward the lodge without waiting for a response. "Bring your gear, we need to talk." The lodge's interior was all exposed beams and mounted animal heads, elk, deer, even a massive grizzly bear that dominated the main wall. But something felt off about the trophies. They were positioned strangely, as if they were watching the room rather than decorating it. The furniture was functional but worn, the kind of hard-used comfort you'd find in a military barracks. Marcus led me to a small office off the main room. The walls were covered with topographical maps marked with various colored pins and zones outlined in different colors. Some areas were marked with symbols I didn't recognize, not standard military or hunting notation. "Sit," Marcus said, settling behind a desk covered with radio equipment, charts, and what looked like incident reports. "First things first, you ever guide before?" "No, but I've spent plenty of time in mountains. Army trained me well enough." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Army training won't mean shit up here. This isn't Afghanistan, Morrison. Different rules, different threats, different ways to die." He pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the desk between us. "These are our protocols. You will memorize every single one and you will follow them exactly. No exceptions, no creative interpretations, no military hero bullshit." I opened the folder. The first page was titled Safety Protocols, Mandatory Compliance. What followed was the most comprehensive and bizarre set of rules I'd ever encountered. Protocol 1. All hunting activities must cease at sunset. No exceptions. Return to base camp immediately upon nightfall. Protocol 2. Use only designated trail markers and communication signals. Never deviate from approved routes without radio clearance. Protocol 3. If you encounter tracks that don't make sense, discontinue pursuit immediately and report to base via emergency frequency. Protocol 4. Never pursue wounded game beyond marked boundary zones. See map designations A through K. Protocol 5. All guides must check in via radio every 30 minutes during active expeditions. Protocol 6. If communication is lost for more than 1 hour, assume emergency protocol and return to base immediately. Protocol 7. Under no circumstances should guides or clients investigate unusual sounds, especially those that mimic human voices. The list went on for 12 pages. Some protocols seemed reasonable for dangerous terrain, but others made no sense. Why would tracks not make sense? What kind of sounds mimic human voices that would be dangerous enough to warrant a protocol? This seems extensive, I said carefully. Marcus's pale eyes fixed on me. You questioning the protocols already, Morrison? No, sir, just trying to understand them fully. Understanding comes with experience. Following comes immediately. He leaned forward. Let me be clear. Every single one of these protocols exists because someone died or disappeared when they weren't followed. This mountain has claimed 11 guides in the past 3 years. The number hit me like cold water. 11? What kind of accidents? Not accidents. Marcus's voice was flat. Mistakes. People who thought they knew better than the protocols. People who decided military training or hunting experience made them special. His eyes never left mine. Are you feeling special, Morrison? No, sir. Good. He stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the darkening forest. You'll start tomorrow with our senior guide, Elena Vasquez. She'll show you the ropes, introduce you to the other guides, explain the territory. But tonight you study those protocols until you can recite them backwards. Where will I be staying? Guide quarters, 100 yards down the path. You'll share with 3 other guides. They'll fill you in on the practical aspects of the job. He turned back to me. One more thing, Morrison. The clients we serve aren't your average weekend warriors. They pay premium prices for exclusive experiences. They expect professionalism, discretion, and results. More importantly, they expect to go home alive and with stories to tell. Understood. Marcus nodded toward the door. Eleanor will meet you at 0600 hours. Don't be late and don't forget to study those protocols. Your life depends on it. As I walked back to my truck to retrieve my gear, the weight of the protocol folder felt heavier than it should have. The mountain air had grown colder with the approaching night, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a sound that made my combat-trained nerves twitch. Something between a howl and a scream, but wrong somehow. Too long, too intelligent. I quickened my pace toward the guide quarters, Marcus's words echoing in my mind. Not accidents. Mistakes. The small cabin that housed the guides was spartanly furnished but clean. 3 other men looked up as I entered. One young and nervous-looking, another older with the 1,000-yard stare I recognized from fellow veterans, and a third who barely acknowledged my presence. You must be the new guy, the young one said, extending his hand. Tommy Chen. Been here about 6 months. The older man nodded at me. David Kowalski. 2 years. His handshake was firm, his eyes assessing me with the automatic evaluation of a fellow soldier. The third man finally looked up from the book he was reading. Elena Vasquez, I'll be training you tomorrow. Her voice carried a slight accent and a weight of authority that commanded immediate respect. Jake Morrison, thanks for having me. Eleanor studied me for a moment. Marcus give you the protocol talk? Just finished reading them. Some of these seem crazy. Elena's expression was unreadable. That's what they all think at first. You'll learn. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. The protocols aren't suggestions, man. They're survival rules. I've seen what happens when people ignore them. What happens? I asked. The room fell silent. David returned to cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision. Eleanor's eyes hardened slightly. Tommy just stared at his hands. You'll learn, Eleanor repeated. Tomorrow we start with the easy trails. You'll meet your first client on Wednesday, assuming you pass the training period. As the others settled in for the night, I spread the protocol manual on my bunk and began memorizing. Outside, the mountain night was filled with sounds that didn't quite match any wildlife I'd encountered in my military service. Too organized, too purposeful. By the time I finally closed the manual, 3 things were clear. This job was nothing like the posting had suggested. The protocols weren't paranoia, but necessity, and I was already in too deep to back out. The last thing I remember before falling asleep was the sound of something large moving through the trees outside our cabin. Footsteps that were almost human, but not quite right. The rhythm was off, the spacing too wide. I pulled my blanket higher and tried to convince myself it was just a bear. It wasn't a very convincing argument. Initial adaptation, coexistence and first signs. The alarm on my phone buzzed at 0530. but I was already awake. Old military habits die hard, and the strange symphony of mountain sounds had kept me in a state of light sleep all night. The cabin was silent, except for David's steady breathing and Tommy's occasional mumbling from what sounded like a nightmare. Eleanor was waiting outside when I emerged, fully geared and holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. The pre-dawn air bit through my jacket, and my breath formed small clouds in the pale light. "Sleep well?" she asked, handing me a cup. "Well enough." I took a sip. The coffee was strong and bitter, military-grade stuff. "Those sounds last night, you'll get used to them. Or you won't, and you'll leave like the others." Eleanor's matter-of-fact tone made it clear this wasn't up for discussion. Today we cover the basic routes, emergency procedures, and client interaction protocols. Save the questions about wildlife for later. We spent the morning hiking established trails, while Eleanor pointed out key landmarks, radio check-in points, and boundary markers. What struck me immediately was how meticulously everything was organized. Every trail junction had numbered metal tags. Every quarter mile had designated communication points. Every boundary was marked with reflective tape that created an almost military precision perimeter system. "Why so much structure?" I asked as we paused at Overlook Point 7. Eleanor checked her watch and keyed her radio. "Base, this is Eleanor. Check-in 7, all clear, proceeding to Point 8. The response came immediately, Marcus's voice confirming receipt. "Structure keeps people alive," she said, shouldering her pack. "Clients pay good money to feel like they're having an adventure, but they want to go home to tell their friends about it. Our job is to give them enough danger to feel tough without actually getting them killed." The protocols mention tracking unusual signs. What qualifies as unusual? Elena stopped walking and turned to face me. "You're pushing, Morrison. I told you to save the wildlife questions. I'm trying to understand what I'm looking for so I can do my job properly." For a long moment, Elena studied my face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slightly. "Rule of thumb. If tracks don't match behavior patterns you learned in the military, don't follow them. If spacing seems wrong for the animal size, don't follow them. If they appear and disappear without logical explanation, definitely don't follow them." She resumed walking. "Most importantly, if your gut tells you something's wrong, trust it. Your combat instincts might be the only thing that keeps you breathing up here." We returned to base camp around 1400 hours. Tommy was sitting on the lodge porch, obsessively checking his rifle action, opening and closing the bolt, checking the chamber, cycling through the magazine. I'd seen the behavior before, usually in soldiers who'd had close calls. "How'd it go?" Tommy asked without looking up from his weapon. "New guy's got good trail sense," Elena replied. "Doesn't ask stupid questions, follows directions." "That's good." Tommy finally looked at me. "You'll need that tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" "Your first client," David said, emerging from the lodge. I hadn't heard him approach. The man moved like a ghost. "Rich lawyer from Seattle. Wants to bag an elk, talks too much, doesn't listen to instructions." Eleanor snorted. "Last guide quit after 3 days with that one. Claimed the client was putting everyone at risk with his behavior." "What kind of behavior?" David and Elena exchanged a look. Tommy went back to checking his rifle. "The kind that gets people killed," David said finally. "Wandering off marked trails, ignoring radio check-ins, taking shots at movement before identifying targets. Sounds like standard rich guy hunter syndrome." "Maybe," Elena said, "but up here, standard stupidity has non-standard consequences." That evening, I helped with equipment maintenance while observing my new colleagues more carefully. Eleanor was methodical to the point of obsession. She counted ammunition 3 times, tested every piece of electronic equipment twice, and spent 20 minutes examining her rifle scope for microscopic flaws that I couldn't detect. The kind of thoroughness that came from experience with equipment failure in life or death situations. Tommy's nervousness wasn't just general anxiety. It was focused. He constantly scanned the tree line, jumped at unexpected sounds, and positioned himself so he could see all approaches to wherever he was sitting. Combat stress reaction, textbook case. David was the most interesting. He moved with the fluid awareness of special operations, but there was something else. He watched everything with the intensity of someone expecting specific types of trouble. When a branch fell in the forest, David's head snapped toward the sound and stayed focused for a full 30 seconds, listening for follow-up noises. "David," I said during a quiet moment, "what's your background?" "Army. Delta Force. 15 years. He didn't elaborate. "What brought you here?" David's pale eyes fixed on me. "Same thing that brought you. Probably. Nowhere else to go. The money's good, but there are other jobs. Not for people like us." David's voice was flat. "Not for people who've seen too much and asked too many questions." Around 2100 hours, I was reviewing the protocols again when I heard the first unusual sound. It started as what might have been an elk bugle, but the pitch was wrong. Too high, too sustained. Elena looked up from her equipment check. Tommy's rifle cleaning stopped mid-motion. "Protocol 7, Elena said quietly. I flipped to the relevant page. Under no circumstances should guides or clients investigate unusual sounds, especially those that mimic human voices. That didn't sound like a human voice, I said. Give it time, David muttered. As if summoned by his words, the sound came again. This time it was unmistakably attempting to mimic human speech, a drawn-out help that raised every hair on my arms. The tone was wrong, the pronunciation too careful, like someone learning to speak by copying sounds without understanding meaning. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Protocol 7, Elena repeated. No investigation, no response, no acknowledgement. But if someone's actually in trouble, they're not. David's voice carried absolute certainty. Trust me on this one, Morrison. They're not. The sound came a third time, closer now and with more confidence. Help. Me. Please. My military training screamed at me to respond, to investigate, to render aid to someone in distress. But the three experienced guides sat motionless, eyes fixed on their tasks, pointedly ignoring the calls. Tommy's hands were shaking as he reassembled his rifle. First week I was here, I heard that same thing, went out with a flashlight to help. He paused, swallowing hard. Found the source about 50 yards into the trees. What was it? Tommy looked at Elena, who shook her head slightly. Something that knew exactly what to say to get me to come closer, Tommy said finally. Something that had probably practiced those words on other people. The calling continued for another 10 minutes, growing more desperate and more human-like with each repetition. By the end, it sounded like a lost child crying for its mother. When it finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than the sound had. How often does this happen? I asked. Often enough, Elena said. The protocols exist for good reasons, Morrison. Every single one of them. What kind of animal mimics human speech? David looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. Who says it's an animal? The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena shot David a warning look, but he just shrugged. New guy's going to find out sooner or later, better he's prepared. Find out what? Elena stood up abruptly. Time for sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day with your first client. She paused at the door. Morrison, stick close to me tomorrow. Don't wander off, don't investigate anything unusual, and don't let the client talk you into breaking protocols. Are we clear? Crystal. But as I lay in my bunk that night, listening to the mountain's strange orchestra of sounds, I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Something was hunting in these mountains, something intelligent enough to mimic human distress calls, and patient enough to practice until it got them right. And tomorrow, I'd be leading a reckless client into its territory. The last thing I heard before finally drifting off was David's voice, barely above a whisper. Welcome to the Cascade Mountain Preserve, Morrison. Try not to become part of the collection. I wanted to ask what he meant by collection, but his breathing had already shifted to the deep rhythm of sleep, or at least what passed for sleep in a place where the darkness held voices that shouldn't exist. First incident, breaking expectations. Richard Blackwood arrived at 800 in a custom Range Rover that probably cost more than I'd made in the last 2 years. 50-something, soft around the middle, wearing enough high-end hunting gear to outfit a small military unit. He stepped out of his vehicle, talking loudly into a satellite phone about stock options and merger deals. You must be my guide, he said, ending his call and extending a manicured hand. Rick Blackwood. I'm here to bag the biggest elk in these mountains. Jake Morrison, I'll be taking you out today. Elena approached carrying 2 day packs and additional radio equipment. Mr. Blackwood, as discussed yesterday, today's hunt will focus on the eastern sectors. We'll be following established trails and maintaining regular radio contact. Blackwood waved dismissively. Sure. Whatever keeps the lawyers happy. But I didn't pay premium rates to walk around like a tourist. I want the real experience. Deep wilderness, trophy animals, bragging rights. I saw Elena's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The eastern sectors offer excellent hunting opportunities while maintaining safety protocols. Safety protocols. Blackwood laughed. Honey, I've hunted on 4 continents. I think I can handle some Pacific Northwest deer trails. We'll be hunting elk, not deer, I interjected. And these mountains have specific challenges that... Look, G.I. Joe, I appreciate the military precision, but I'm paying for an adventure, not a nature walk. If I wanted safe, I'd go to a game preserve. Blackwood shouldered his rifle, a custom .300 Winchester Magnum that probably cost more than my truck. Now, where are we going to find the big boys? Eleanor handed me one of the radios, making sure to catch my eye. Her expression was clear. Watch him carefully. We set out on Trail 7, one of the eastern routes that Elena had shown me the day before. Blackwood kept up a constant stream of commentary about his previous hunts, his successful law practice, and his connections to various politicians and business leaders. The man apparently couldn't tolerate silence for more than 30 seconds. So what's the deal with all the numbered markers? He asked as we passed Junction Point 12. Seems like overkill for a hunting operation. Emergency navigation, I replied. Easy to get lost in these mountains. Emergency navigation, my ass. This is more organized than most military operations I've consulted on. You guys running some kind of government contract up here? Elena, who was walking point, stopped and turned around. Mr. Blackwood, could you keep your voice down? Sound carries in the mountains, and we don't want to spook any wildlife. Right. Stealth mode. But he only lowered his volume for about 5 minutes before resuming his normal conversational volume. We'd been hiking for about 2 hours when Elena held up a closed fist, standard military signal for halt. I immediately stopped and motioned for Blackwood to do the same. Elena was crouched, examining something on the ground ahead of us. What is it? Blackwood whispered, finally showing some awareness of the need for quiet. Elena stood up slowly, her face pale. She motioned for me to approach while signaling Blackwood to stay put. The tracks were unlike anything I'd ever seen. At first glance, they appeared human, 5 toes, roughly the right proportions for a foot. But the spacing was wrong. The impressions were nearly 18 inches apart, suggesting either impossibly long strides or something that moved in bounds rather than steps. More disturbing, the tracks seemed to shift between bipedal and quadrupedal patterns. 4 clear footprints in a row, then a gap, then 2 prints side by side as if the creature had stood upright, then back to 4. Jesus, I whispered. What the hell made these? Elena's hand moved to her radio. Base, this is Elena. We have a code yellow situation at Junction 12. Please confirm current location of all other teams. Marcus's voice crackled back immediately. All teams accounted for and outside your sector, Elena. Nature of code yellow? Elena looked at me, then at the tracks. Unusual sign. Discontinuing pursuit and returning to base per Protocol 3. Mr. Blackwood's not going to like that, I said quietly. As if summoned by his name, Blackwood appeared at my shoulder. What's the holdup? Did you find something? We need to head back, Elena said firmly. We've encountered sign that indicates dangerous wildlife in the area. Blackwood pushed past us to examine the tracks. These look like footprints. Big ones, but still just footprints. What's dangerous about footprints? The pattern doesn't match known local wildlife behavior, I said, remembering Elena's training from the day before. When tracks don't make sense, we don't follow them. Don't make sense? Blackwood knelt down, studying the impressions. They make perfect sense. Something big walked through here. Probably a bear walking upright occasionally, which they do when they're investigating scents. I've seen it in Alaska. Elena keyed her radio again. Base client is requesting continuation despite code yellow. Please advise. Negative. Return to base immediately per Protocol 3. No exceptions. Blackwood stood up, his face reddening. Now wait just a goddamn minute. I'm paying premium rates for this experience, and you're telling me we're going to run away from some footprints? Mr. Blackwood, Elena's voice carried a warning edge. The protocols exist for everyone's safety. We need to return to base. Bullshit. I've hunted grizzlies in Alaska, Cape Buffalo in Africa, and polar bears in the Arctic. I'm not going to be scared off by some mysterious footprints that don't make sense. He shouldered his rifle and started following the trail. You can come with me or go back and explain to my lawyers why I didn't get the service I paid for. Elena grabbed my arm. We can't let him follow those tracks. Then we stop him. We caught up to Blackwood about 50 yards down the trail. He was moving with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered anything he couldn't buy, bully, or shoot his way out of. The tracks continued ahead of us, and I noticed they were getting fresher, the edges sharper, the depth more pronounced. Mr. Blackwood, I called, we need to stop. Look at this, he said, pointing ahead. The tracks are getting clearer. Whatever made them can't be far ahead. This is exactly the kind of experience I came here for. That's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze. It started as a low rumble, like a large animal breathing, but it was too rhythmic, too controlled. Then it shifted, becoming something that sounded almost like counting. 1, 2, 3. Elena went rigid. Protocol 7. Nobody moves, nobody responds. The sound came again, closer now. 4, 5, 6. Blackwood raised his rifle. Something's playing games with us. I don't like games. Put the weapon down, I hissed. Don't engage. 7, 8, 9. The voice was definitely not human, but it was trying to be. Each number was pronounced with careful precision, like a child learning to count. But there was something predatory in the tone, something that suggested this wasn't practice. It was hunting behavior. 10. The silence that followed was worse than the counting. Elena had her hand on her sidearm, eyes scanning the tree line. I could feel every instinct from my military training screaming at me to take cover, establish fields of fire, prepare for contact. Blackwood, however, seemed energized by the encounter. This is fantastic. Some kind of trained animal, maybe an escaped circus performer? The story potential here is incredible. We're leaving. Now. Eleanor's voice brooked no argument. That's when the counting resumed, but from a different direction. 1, 2, 3, then from another direction, 4, 5, 6, and another. 7, 8, 9. We were surrounded. Multiple sources, all counting in that same careful, predatory voice. The pattern was coordinated, intelligent, designed to create confusion and panic. Oh shit, Blackwood whispered, finally understanding that this wasn't a game or a show put on for his entertainment. Elena keyed her radio. Base, this is Elena. Code Red. We are surrounded and need immediate extraction at Junction 12. Multiple contacts using vocal mimicry. Marcus's response was immediate. Elena, deploy signal flares and maintain position. Extraction team en route. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Elena pulled a flare gun from her pack and fired a bright red flare high into the air. The sudden light seemed to disturb whatever was surrounding us. The counting stopped abruptly, replaced by sounds of rapid movement through the underbrush. What the hell was that? Blackwood demanded, his expensive rifle shaking in his hands. Elena was already moving, leading us back toward the main trail at a pace just short of running. Something that's been studying human behavior, something that's learned to count, but doesn't understand why we do it. That's impossible. Animals don't... Mr. Blackwood, I interrupted. Animals also don't leave tracks that shift between bipedal and quadrupedal movement. They don't coordinate vocal patterns to surround prey. And they don't practice human speech until they get it right. We reached the main trail as the sound of ATVs approached from the direction of base camp. Marcus arrived with 2 other men I didn't recognize, all carrying military-grade equipment and moving with tactical precision. Everyone accounted for? Marcus asked, scanning the tree line. All here, Elena confirmed. Multiple contacts, vocal mimicry, coordinated behavior. Marcus nodded grimly. Load up. We'll debrief back at base. As we rode back to camp, Blackwood sat in stunned silence for the first time since his arrival. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. What exactly are you people hunting up here? Elena looked at Marcus, who shook his head slightly. We're not hunting anything, mister. Blackwood, Marcus said. We're trying very hard not to be hunted. That evening, after Blackwood had been escorted to his vehicle and sent on his way with a full refund and a strict non-disclosure agreement, Elena found me sitting on the lodge porch. You did good today, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Followed protocols, kept the client alive, didn't panic when things went sideways. Those tracks, I know. And the counting. I know. I turned to look at her. Eleanor, what the hell are we really doing up here? For a long moment she stared out at the darkening forest. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. We're bait, Morrison. Highly trained, well-armed, professional bait. Bait for what? Eleanor stood up to go inside. For things that used to be human, things that remember just enough about being human to use it against us. She paused at the door. Welcome to the real job, Morrison. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow Marcus wants to have a conversation with you about what you saw today. As I sat alone in the gathering darkness, listening to the mountain's nocturnal symphony, I realized that everything I thought I knew about this job had been wrong. The protocols weren't about protecting clients from wildlife. They were about protecting everyone from something that had learned to hunt humans by studying how humans behave. And I was beginning to understand that I wasn't just an employee here. I was part of an ongoing experiment in survival, discreet investigation, search for answers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that coordinated counting echoing through the forest. Methodical, predatory, intelligent, things that used to be human. Eleanor's words kept cycling through my mind like a broken record. At 500, I gave up on sleep and made my way to the lodge's main room. David was already there, sitting at the large table with a cup of coffee and what looked like topographical maps spread out in front of him. He looked up as I entered, unsurprised to see me. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Not after yesterday. I poured myself coffee from the pot David had made. Mind if I ask you something? David folded one of the maps and set it aside. Depends on the question. Elena said we're bait. Bait for things that used to be human. What did she mean by used to be? David studied my face for a long moment, then gestured to the chair across from him. How much do you know about military research programs, Morrison? Enough. Saw some classified projects during my tours. Enhancement programs, experimental weapons, psychological operations. I sat down. Are we talking about super soldier programs? Something like that. David pulled out a different map, one I hadn't seen before. This one was marked with different symbols than the standard hunting maps. Red zones, yellow zones, and several areas marked with symbols that looked like biohazard warnings. How long you been out of the service? 3 years. Medical discharge after my second tour went sideways. Then you probably heard rumors about Project Darwin. Enhancement protocols designed to create soldiers with superior physical capabilities and enhanced hunting instincts. I had heard rumors. Whispered conversations in mess halls about volunteers who disappeared into black sites and came back different. Stronger, faster, but wrong somehow. I heard stories, thought they were bullshit. They weren't. David pointed to one of the red zones on his map. This entire mountain range was designated as a testing ground for Darwin subjects. The idea was to create soldiers who could operate independently in hostile terrain for extended periods, using enhanced physical capabilities and primitive hunting instincts to survive. What went wrong? David's laugh was bitter. Everything. The enhancement process worked too well. Subjects developed capabilities beyond design parameters, but they also lost higher cognitive functions. Language, social bonds, complex reasoning, all sacrificed for predatory efficiency. So they became apex predators with human intelligence but animal instincts. They retained enough human memory to understand human behavior, but they lost the psychological structures that make us human. Empathy, morality, the ability to see other humans as anything but prey. I thought about the coordinated counting, the way the voices had surrounded us. How many are we talking about? Best estimates? 12 to 15 active subjects in these mountains. Maybe more. David folded the map. The program was shut down 4 years ago after subjects started targeting researchers instead of designated test subjects. But you can't just terminate super soldiers who know they're being terminated. So they escaped. They were released. Officially, the program ended with all subjects accounted for. Unofficially, this mountain range became a containment zone. The subjects are monitored, studied, and occasionally fed. The implications hit me like cold water. Fed? David met my eyes directly. Where do you think problem employees go, Morrison? Whistleblowers, people who ask too many questions, soldiers with PTSD who might talk to the wrong journalists. Jesus Christ. The beauty of the system is that it's voluntary. People like us desperate enough to take jobs that seem too good to be true, sign non-disclosure agreements and waivers that basically give the government permission to use us however they see fit. David stood up. The hunting guide business is just cover. Our real job is to serve as controlled prey for ongoing behavioral studies. The clients, most are legitimate, rich hunters who pay premium rates for exclusive experiences, but some are observers, military researchers, corporate sponsors, government officials who want to see their investment in action. David walked to the window, looking out at the forest. Your client yesterday? That was a real hunter. But next week's client might be a colonel who wants to watch Darwin's subjects demonstrate their tracking capabilities. Elena and Tommy know this? Elena figured it out after 6 months. Tommy had a breakdown when he realized what was happening. That's why he's so jumpy. He knows he's trapped but can't bring himself to leave. Why don't you leave? David turned back to me. Because they don't let people like us leave, Morrison. We know too much. The only way out of this job is in a body bag or as a Darwin subject's next meal. Before I could respond, the lodge door opened and Marcus walked in. He took one look at the maps on the table and David's expression, then focused on me. Morrison, we need to talk. David quickly gathered his maps. I was just explaining basic territorial boundaries to the new guy. I'm sure you were. Marcus's tone was neutral, but his eyes were calculating. Morrison, my office, now. As I followed Marcus, David caught my arm. Remember what I told you about asking too many questions, he whispered. Some questions get you killed. Marcus's office felt different this time, more oppressive, more like an interrogation room than a workplace. He settled behind his desk and pulled out a thick file. Yesterday was your first real encounter with our local wildlife, Marcus said. Elena reports that you handled yourself well, followed protocols, kept the client safe, didn't panic under pressure. Thank you, sir. But she also reports that you've been asking questions about the tracks, about the nature of the threats, about what we're really doing up here. Marcus opened the file. That's natural curiosity, Morrison, but curiosity can be dangerous in this environment. I'm just trying to understand the job requirements. The job requirement is simple. Follow protocols, keep clients alive, don't ask questions that might compromise operational security. Marcus pulled out several photographs and spread them on the desk. These are images from security cameras positioned throughout the mountain range. Take a look. The photographs were grainy but clear enough to make my blood run cold. They showed humanoid figures moving through the forest with inhuman speed and agility. In one image, a figure was climbing a vertical rock face without equipment. In another, something was hanging upside down from a tree branch, apparently watching a trail below. The Darwin subjects, I said. Marcus's expression didn't change. I see David's been sharing his theories with you. Are they theories? Does it matter? Marcus gathered the photographs. What matters is that you understand the reality of your situation. You signed contracts, Morrison. Legal documents that bind you to this job for a minimum of 1 year. You also signed waivers that absolve this organization of responsibility for any injuries or death that might result from your employment. And if I want to leave? You're free to go at any time. Of course, the non-disclosure agreements you signed carry severe penalties for violation. Criminal prosecution, financial ruin, potential national security charges. Marcus leaned back in his chair. And there's the practical consideration that people who leave this job tend to experience accidents within a few months of departure. The threat was delivered in the same tone Marcus might use to discuss the weather. So I'm trapped. You're employed, with excellent pay, comprehensive benefits, and the opportunity to serve your country in a unique capacity. Marcus stood up. Tomorrow, you'll be taking out another client. This one's different. A military observer who's here to evaluate Darwin subject behavior patterns. Your job is to provide controlled exposure opportunities while maintaining safety protocols. Controlled exposure? You'll be given specific routes that increase the likelihood of Darwin subject encounters while maintaining plausible deniability. The client will get his observations, the subjects will get behavioral enrichment, and you'll demonstrate your value as a professional guide. I felt sick. You're asking me to use myself and a client as bait. I'm asking you to do your job. Marcus's voice hardened. The same job that pays you more in a month than you made in 6 months at your previous employment. The same job that keeps you from being homeless and provides treatment for your PTSD. By feeding me to enhanced super soldiers. By participating in ongoing research that could revolutionize military capabilities and save American lives. Marcus sat back down. Don't kid yourself, Morrison. You're not a victim here. You're a volunteer who signed up for hazardous duty because you needed the money. The only difference between this and your military service is that now you know exactly what you're fighting. That evening I found Tommy on the lodge porch, cleaning his rifle for what had to be the 10th time that day. He looked up as I approached, his eyes carrying the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much. David told you, didn't he? Tommy asked. About the Darwin subjects, yeah? And you're still here? I sat down beside him. Where else am I going to go? Tommy laughed bitterly. That's what we all tell ourselves. But the truth is, we stay because we're addicted to the adrenaline. Being prey for super predators is terrifying, but it's also the most alive we've felt since we left the service. Speak for yourself. Really? Tell me you didn't feel something yesterday when those things were counting around us. Tell me your heart wasn't pounding, your senses weren't sharper than they've been in years. Tommy set down his rifle. We're all broken here, Morrison. The Darwin subjects aren't the only ones who lost their humanity in military experiments. Before I could respond, Elena emerged from the lodge carrying her equipment pack. Morrison, she said, walk with me. We walked in silence toward the trail markers, Elena leading me to a small clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center was a memorial, a simple stone marker with names carved into it. Previous guides, Elena explained. The ones who didn't make it. I counted 11 names. David said this program has been running for 4 years. It has. We've lost nearly 3 guides per year on average. Eleanor ran her finger along one of the names. Some died because they broke protocols. Others died because they got unlucky. A few died because Marcus decided they knew too much. And you're telling me this why? Elena turned to face me. Because tomorrow's client isn't just a military observer. He's a termination specialist. His job is to evaluate whether the Darwin subjects are still useful or if they need to be eliminated. What does that have to do with me? If he decides to terminate the subjects, he'll also terminate everyone with knowledge of the program. That includes all the guides, Marcus, and anyone else who might pose a security risk. Elena's voice was quiet but urgent. We need to start planning our exit strategy, Morrison, before we become the next names on this memorial. As we walked back to the lodge, I realized that my desperate grab for financial stability had put me in the center of a conspiracy that could get me killed whether I participated or tried to escape. The Darwin subjects weren't the only predators in these mountains, and I was running out of time to figure out which predators posed the greatest threat. Concrete discovery, physical evidence. The termination specialist arrived at dawn in an unmarked black SUV with government plates. Colonel James Harrison looked every inch the career military officer, pressed uniform, regulation haircut, and the cold eyes of someone who'd made difficult decisions without losing sleep over them. Unlike Blackwood's nervous energy, Harrison radiated the calm confidence of a predator evaluating other predators. Mr. Morrison, he said, extending a firm handshake. I understand you're my guide today. Yes, sir. We'll be exploring the northern sectors where wildlife activity has been most concentrated. Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Wildlife. Yes, I'm very interested in observing the local wildlife. As I loaded our gear, I noticed Harrison's equipment was decidedly non-standard for a hunting expedition. Along with a high-end rifle, he carried what looked like military-grade recording equipment, a tablet computer with satellite uplink capabilities, and a sidearm that I recognized as Special Operations Issue. Eleanor approached under the pretense of checking our communication equipment. "Remember the routes we discussed," she said quietly, adjusting my radio. "Stay within designated zones, maintain regular contact, and don't let him wander off alone." But as we reached the trailhead, Harrison stopped and pulled out his tablet. "Actually, Morrison, I'd like to deviate from the standard routes today. I have specific coordinates I need to visit." He showed me the tablet screen. The coordinates he'd marked were in areas that weren't on any of the official hunting maps, deep in the red zones that David's map had marked as Darwin subject territory. "Sir, those areas aren't cleared for hunting expeditions. Dangerous terrain, unstable wildlife populations." "I'm not here to hunt, Morrison. I'm here to observe and evaluate. Those coordinates will give me the observational opportunities I need." Every instinct told me to refuse, but Harrison wasn't making a request. This was a military officer giving orders to someone he considered subordinate personnel. "Roger that, sir, but I'll need to modify our safety protocols for those areas." "No protocol modifications necessary. I want to see natural behavior patterns, not responses to human safety measures." As we hiked toward Harrison's coordinates, I tried to maintain the illusion of a normal hunting expedition while mentally preparing for the worst. The northern sectors felt different from the eastern trails where I'd encountered the Darwin subjects before. The forest was quieter, the wildlife noticeably absent, and the very air seemed to carry a sense of watchful tension. Harrison remained silent for most of the hike, occasionally stopping to make notes on his tablet or adjust his recording equipment. It wasn't until we reached his first coordinate point that he began to explain his real purpose. "Tell me, Morrison, what do you know about behavioral adaptation in enhanced subjects?" "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean by enhanced subjects." Harrison stopped walking and turned to face me. "Drop the act, soldier. I know you've been briefed on the Darwin project. I also know you've had direct contact with active subjects. What I want to know is your professional assessment of their current operational status." The direct question left me no room to maintain plausible deniability. "They're intelligent, coordinated, and actively hunting human prey. They've retained enough human cognitive function to understand human behavior patterns, but lost the psychological restraints that prevent them from targeting humans." "Interesting." Harrison made notes on his tablet. "And your assessment of containment effectiveness?" "Containment." I thought about the memorial with 11 names. "Sir, I don't think these subjects are contained. I think they're being managed." Harrison's expression shifted to something approaching approval. "Elaborate." "The mountain range serves as an open-air laboratory where subjects are provided with regular food sources, hunting guides, problematic personnel, anyone the program needs to eliminate discreetly. The subjects get behavioral enrichment, researchers get ongoing data, and the government gets a convenient disposal method for security risks." "Very perceptive." Harrison resumed walking. "Now, based on that assessment, what would you recommend regarding the subject's continued operational status?" The question felt like a trap. Any answer could be interpreted as a security risk. "That's above my pay grade, sir. I'm just trying to keep myself and clients alive long enough to do my job." "Your job, Morrison, is whatever I say it is. Today, your job is to help me observe subject behavior in their natural environment. I need to see them hunt, communicate, and demonstrate their enhanced capabilities. Sir, it would require using yourself as bait." "Yes, I'm aware." Harrison's tone was matter-of-fact. "Don't worry, Morrison. I have no intention of feeding you to the subjects unless it becomes operationally necessary." Before I could respond, Harrison pulled out what looked like a modified radio and began broadcasting on a frequency I didn't recognize. The transmission wasn't words. It was a series of clicks and tones that sounded almost like the counting pattern I'd heard 2 days earlier. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Calling them." Harrison finished his transmission and shouldered his rifle. "Darwin subjects respond to specific audio stimuli. The program developed several communication protocols before the subjects lost verbal capabilities. Within minutes, I heard movement in the forest around us. Not the random sounds of wildlife, but the purposeful movement of something large and intelligent." Harrison remained calm, adjusting his recording equipment and making notes. "There," he said, pointing to a ridge about 200 yards away. "Subject Delta 7. Note the muscular development and movement efficiency. I followed his gaze and felt my blood freeze. The figure on the ridge was humanoid, but wrong in every proportional way. Too tall, too broad through the shoulders, moving with a fluid grace that was distinctly non-human. It was watching us with the focused attention of a predator evaluating prey. "Sir, we need to leave. Now." "Negative. I need to observe pack coordination behavior." Harrison keyed his modified radio again, transmitting another series of tones. The response was immediate. Movement from multiple directions, closing in on our position with tactical precision. I counted at least 4 distinct positions, all maintaining cover while advancing. "Colonel, they're surrounding us." "Excellent. This demonstrates retention of military tactical training despite cognitive degradation." Harrison was recording everything, apparently unconcerned by our increasingly desperate situation. "Note how they're using terrain features for concealment while maintaining coordinated movement patterns." That's when I heard the counting again, but different this time. Instead of the simple numerical sequence I'd heard before, this was more complex. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. They were using military phonetic alphabet. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "They remember their training." "Not just remember," Harrison said, still recording. "They've adapted it. They're using modified military communication protocols for pack hunting coordination." The counting continued, growing closer. Delta, Echo, Foxtrot. "Sir, we need to extract immediately. They're about to close the net." Harrison finally looked up from his recording equipment. "You're right, time to see their pursuit capabilities." Without warning, he grabbed a flashbang grenade from his pack and tossed it into the forest between us and the closest Darwin subject. The explosion and blinding light created momentary chaos, giving us a chance to move. "Run, Morrison. Let's see how fast they really are." We crashed through the forest at a dead sprint, Harrison somehow managing to continue recording while running. Behind us, I could hear pursuit, multiple subjects crashing through underbrush with superhuman speed and coordination. "They're gaining," I shouted. "Expected." Enhanced subjects demonstrate approximately 300% improvement in speed and endurance over baseline human capabilities. Harrison's breathing wasn't even labored. "But they also demonstrate predictable pack hunting behaviors that can be exploited." He suddenly veered left, leading us down a steep ravine toward a stream. "Water disrupts scent trails and forces them to rely on visual tracking, which reduces their coordination advantage." We splashed through the stream using the rocky bottom to mask our footprints. The pursuit sounds faded slightly, suggesting Harrison's tactic was working. "There's an emergency cache about half a mile downstream," Harrison said. "Supply depot for special operations personnel." The cache turned out to be a camouflaged bunker built into the hillside. Harrison produced a key and led me inside. The interior was stocked with military equipment, communications gear, and enough supplies for extended operations. "This isn't a hunting expedition," I said, as Harrison activated a secure communications terminal. "No, it's not." Harrison began uploading his recorded data. "I'm here to conduct final evaluation of Darwin subjects before program termination." "Program termination?" "The subjects have exceeded operational parameters. They're too intelligent, too coordinated, and too successful at hunting human prey. The cost-benefit analysis no longer supports continued operation." Harrison pulled up files on his terminal, detailed profiles of each Darwin subject, including their original military records and enhancement procedures. The photos showed normal soldiers before the program, then tracking their transformation into the creatures we'd just encountered. What about the guides, the support staff? "All personnel with direct knowledge of the program will be relocated to other assignments or retired from service as appropriate." Harrison's tone made it clear that retirement might not be voluntary. "You're going to kill everyone. I'm going to eliminate security risks and terminate a failed experiment. The subjects will be neutralized using targeted chemical agents deployed via drone. Support personnel will be debriefed and reassigned based on their security clearance and cooperation levels." Harrison showed me another file, a list of all current personnel at the facility. Everyone's name was there: Marcus, Elena, David, Tommy, and myself. Next to each name was a color code: green, yellow, or red. My name was marked red. What do the colors mean? "Green subjects are suitable for reassignment with standard debriefing. Yellow subjects require enhanced security protocols and monitoring. Red subjects... Harrison paused. Red subjects pose unacceptable security risks and require permanent resolution. Because I know too much? Because you've demonstrated independent thinking, military training, and the ability to analyze operational structure. You're exactly the type of person who might surface years later with inconvenient testimony or leaked documents. I stared at the list. Elena was also marked red. David was yellow. Tommy, surprisingly, was green. When? Chemical deployment is scheduled for tomorrow at 600 hours. Personnel terminations will occur simultaneously to prevent security breaches. As Harrison continued uploading his data, I realized I was looking at evidence of a mass murder disguised as program termination. The Darwin subjects would be eliminated, but so would anyone who could prove they existed. You're going to make it look like an accident. Chemical leak from an abandoned mining operation, tragic but not uncommon in these mountains. There will be an investigation, environmental cleanup, and the area will be declared permanently unsafe for human habitation. Harrison finished his upload and began shutting down the equipment. We should head back, Morrison. I need to complete my report, and you need to prepare for tomorrow's activities. As we left the cache, I realized I was walking back to my own execution. In less than 24 hours, everyone at the facility would be dead, and the Darwin Project would officially never have existed. But Harrison had made one mistake. He'd shown me concrete evidence, names, dates, operational details, and locations. For the first time since arriving at Cascade Mountain Outfitters, I had physical proof of the conspiracy. The question was whether I could do anything with that information before tomorrow's dawn brought chemical death from the sky. As we hiked back toward base camp, I began planning the most important mission of my life, staying alive long enough to expose the truth. Initial confrontation. First major revelation. We returned to base camp as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of red that seemed ominous given what I'd learned. Harrison maintained his professional demeanor, but I could see him evaluating every detail of the facility with the eye of someone planning its destruction. He made notes about building layouts, personnel locations, and potential security weaknesses. "Excellent work today, Morrison," he said as we reached the lodge. "Your cooperation has been noted in my report." The words felt like a eulogy. Marcus was waiting on the lodge porch, his expression unreadable as Harrison approached. "Colonel, I trust your observational mission was successful?" "Very successful. I have everything I need for my final assessment." Harrison handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "These are my preliminary recommendations. We'll discuss implementation details this evening." As Harrison walked toward the guest quarters, Marcus opened the envelope and scanned its contents. His face went pale, then hardened into a mask of grim acceptance. "Morrison," Marcus said quietly, "my office, now." Eleanor was emerging from the guide quarters as I passed. She caught my eye and mouthed a single word: "Tonight." Marcus's office felt like a tomb. He closed the door, activated what looked like a signal jammer, then turned to face me with the expression of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. "How much did Harrison tell you?" "Enough. I decided directness was my only option." "He showed me the termination list, Marcus. I know what's happening tomorrow." Marcus sat down heavily behind his desk. "Then you know we're all dead men walking." "We don't have to be." "Really?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think we can fight Colonel James Harrison and whatever military assets he has backing him? The man who designed half the protocols we use to survive up here. Harrison designed the protocols? Harrison was the original Darwin Project commander. He created the enhancement procedures, designed the containment protocols, and established this facility as a testing ground." Marcus pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "He's not here to evaluate the subjects, Morrison. He's here to clean up his own mess." Marcus poured 2 drinks and pushed one across the desk. The Darwin Project was Harrison's baby from the beginning. He selected the subjects, oversaw their enhancement, and designed the psychological conditioning that was supposed to maintain their human loyalty while enhancing their predatory capabilities. I took the drink, but didn't sip it. What went wrong? Everything. The enhancement process worked too well. Subjects developed capabilities beyond anything Harrison had predicted. But the psychological conditioning failed completely. Instead of loyal super soldiers, he created apex predators with human intelligence and military training. Marcus drank deeply before continuing. The first incident happened 3 years ago. A Darwin subject designated Alpha 1 killed 2 researchers and escaped containment. Harrison convinced his superiors that it was an isolated failure, that the other subjects could be controlled. But they couldn't. Within 6 months, all 12 subjects had broken conditioning. They didn't escape. They took control. They began hunting researchers, guards, anyone who entered their territory. Harrison lost 43 personnel before he convinced his superiors to implement the current containment protocol. Using guides as managed prey. Using guides as a sustainable food source while maintaining the illusion of containment. Marcus finished his drink and poured another. Harrison sold the program as ongoing research with practical applications, but he knew from the beginning that he'd created monsters he couldn't control. So why terminate the program now? Marcus pulled out a classified report and slid it across the desk. Because the subjects are evolving. Harrison's latest intelligence indicates they're developing new capabilities, enhanced communication, tool use, and most importantly, reproductive behaviors. I scanned the report. The language was technical, but the implications were terrifying. The Darwin subjects weren't just surviving in the mountains. They were adapting, learning, and potentially creating a breeding population. They're mating. Female subjects are showing signs of pregnancy. If Darwin subjects can reproduce, Harrison's containment failure becomes a species-level threat. He can't allow enhanced predators to establish a permanent population. So he's going to kill everyone who knows about it and blame it on an industrial accident. Chemical weapons deployment disguised as a mining leak, clean, deniable, and permanent. Marcus stood up and walked to his window. 47 people will die tomorrow, Morrison. Subjects, guides, support staff, and anyone else who might pose a security risk. Including you, including me. I've been running this facility for 3 years. I know every detail of the operation, every protocol, every failure. Harrison can't let me live. I stood up and joined Marcus at the window. In the distance, I could see lights moving through the forest, Darwin's subjects beginning their nightly hunt. There has to be a way out. For you, maybe. You're military trained, physically capable, and you know the terrain now. Elena thinks you have a chance if you leave tonight. What about the others? Marcus turned to face me. The others are already dead, Morrison. The question is whether you want to die with them or live long enough to expose what happened here. Before I could respond, Marcus's radio crackled to life. Base, this is Team 7. We have multiple contacts approaching the perimeter. Darwin subjects are moving in coordinated formation toward the facility. Marcus keyed his radio. Copy, Team 7. All personnel implement lockdown protocols immediately. Sir, this isn't normal hunting behavior. They're moving like they're preparing for an assault. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Through the window, we could see more lights in the forest. Too many lights, moving with military precision. They know, I said. Know what? About tomorrow's termination. Harrison used communication protocols to call them during our mission. They probably understand enough to realize something's changed. Marcus grabbed his rifle and tactical gear. If the subjects are planning an assault on the facility, Harrison's timeline just accelerated. He'll call in the chemical strike tonight. The lodge's emergency alarm began blaring, 3 long blasts followed by a continuous tone. Outside, I could hear personnel running to defensive positions and vehicles starting up. Morrison, Marcus said, loading his weapon, I'm going to tell you something that might save your life. This facility has emergency protocols that override even Harrison's authority. If I can trigger a Code Black alert, it will bring in military assets that Harrison doesn't control. What's Code Black? Containment breach with civilian threat potential. It automatically triggers special operations response and congressional notification. Even Harrison can't bury a Code Black incident. Marcus led me to a secure communications panel I hadn't seen before. The problem is that triggering Code Black requires confirmation from 2 senior personnel with appropriate clearance. I'm one. Harrison is the other. And Harrison won't cooperate. Not willingly. But if he's dead or incapacitated, His authorization codes can be used by any surviving senior personnel. The implications were clear. Marcus was asking me to help him kill Colonel Harrison. That's assassination of a military officer. That's survival. And it's the only way to prevent Harrison from covering up 3 years of government-sanctioned murder. Before I could respond, Elena burst through the door. We have a problem. Tommy's missing, and David found Harrison's real equipment cache. What kind of equipment? Chemical weapons deployment system, automated drones programmed for area saturation. Harrison isn't waiting for military assets. He's planning to trigger the chemical strike himself. Marcus cursed and moved toward his weapon cabinet. Where's the deployment system? David's trying to disarm it, but he needs more time. The system is hardened against tampering and protected by military-grade security protocols. Through the window, muzzle flashes began lighting up the forest. The Darwin subjects had begun their assault on the facility perimeter. How long before they breached the defensive line? Marcus asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15, Elena replied. The subjects are using military tactics, suppressing fire, flanking maneuvers, coordinated assault patterns. Our security teams are good, but they're not equipped to fight enhanced soldiers with tactical training. Marcus made his decision. Elena, take Morrison and find Harrison. Disable the chemical deployment system by any means necessary. I'll trigger the emergency beacon and try to coordinate our defenses. What about Tommy? Tommy's probably dead. Harrison doesn't leave loose ends. As we prepared to leave Marcus's office, he grabbed my arm. Morrison, if you get the chance to take Harrison alive, do it. We need his authorization codes to trigger Code Black, but if it comes down to a choice between capturing him and stopping the chemical strike, stop the chemical strike. Even if it means letting the Darwin subjects overrun the facility. Eleanor and I moved through the lodge toward Harrison's quarters, using the chaos of the battle to mask our approach. Through the windows, I could see the defensive perimeter collapsing as Darwin subjects used their enhanced capabilities to outflank human defenders. Elena, I said, as we reached Harrison's door, if we don't make it out of this, we will. We have to. She checked her sidearm and prepared to breach the door. Because someone has to survive to tell the world what happened here. And if the Darwin subjects win? Elena's expression hardened. Then, at least, Harrison's cover-up dies with him. She kicked open the door and we found ourselves face to face with Colonel Harrison. He was standing over Tommy's body, a smoking pistol in his hand. Right on schedule, Harrison said calmly. I was wondering when you'd figure out the chemical deployment system. It's over, Harrison, Elena said, her weapon trained on the colonel. The facility is compromised, your timeline is blown, and in about 5 minutes this place is going to be overrun by your own creations. Harrison smiled. Actually, everything is proceeding exactly according to plan. The Darwin subjects' assault on the facility provides perfect justification for immediate chemical deployment. No survivors, no witnesses, no evidence. Except us. You're not survivors yet, Harrison said, and pressed a button on a remote control. Through the window, I could see drones rising from concealed positions around the facility, their payload systems already beginning to deploy chemical weapons into the mountain air. We had minutes before the entire area became a death zone, and Harrison was standing between us and the only system that could stop it. Central revelation. Exposure of truth. The chemical drones hummed overhead like mechanical vultures, their payload dispersal creating a deadly fog that was already creeping toward the lodge. Harrison stood calmly in the midst of chaos, his finger still hovering over the remote control as if he were conducting a symphony of death. You have approximately 8 minutes before the chemical agent reaches lethal concentration in this building, Harrison said conversationally. I suggest you spend that time wisely. Elena kept her weapon trained on him. Shut down the deployment system. I'm afraid that's not possible. The system is automated and hardened against external interference. Once initiated, it runs to completion. Harrison set down the remote control and clasped his hands behind his back. Besides, shutting it down would defeat the purpose. Outside, the sounds of battle were intensifying. Automatic weapons fire mixed with inhuman roars and screams that could have come from either Darwin subjects or human defenders. Through the window, I could see muzzle flashes getting closer to the lodge. The purpose being covering up your failures? I asked. Harrison's expression shifted to something approaching pride. Failures. Mr. Morrison, you're looking at the most successful military enhancement program in human history. The Darwin Project exceeded every performance parameter we established. By creating monsters that hunt human beings. By creating apex predators with enhanced capabilities and military training. The fact that they've adapted beyond our original programming is evidence of the program's success, not its failure. Elena's eyes were watering from the chemical agent beginning to seep into the building. Success. You've lost control of 12 enhanced soldiers who are breeding in the mountains and using people as livestock. Lost control? Harrison laughed. I never had control. Control was never the objective. The words hit me like ice water. What? The Darwin Project was never about creating controllable super soldiers. It was about creating a sustainable population of enhanced humans capable of independent survival and reproduction. Harrison walked to the window, seemingly unbothered by the approaching chemical cloud. We've been preparing for civilization's collapse for decades, Mr. Morrison. When climate change, resource depletion, or nuclear war destroys modern society, humanity will need enhanced survivors to rebuild. Elena stared at him in horror. You deliberately created breeding populations of enhanced predators. I created humanity's evolutionary successors. The Darwin subjects represent what our species needs to become to survive in a post-civilizational environment. Harrison turned back to us. Enhanced physical capabilities, efficient pack coordination, reduced dependency on technology, and simplified social structures focused on survival and reproduction. They're murderers. They're survivors. The fact that they view unenhanced humans as prey is simply natural selection in action. Superior predators eliminate inferior competitors. It's basic evolutionary biology. The chemical fog was thickening outside, and I could taste the beginning of its effects, a metallic bitterness that made my throat burn. More disturbing, the sounds of battle were changing. Human screams were becoming less frequent, replaced by the organized vocalizations of Darwin subjects communicating in their modified military protocols. How many sites? Elena asked, her voice strained from the chemical exposure. Sites? How many Darwin breeding populations have you established? Harrison's smile was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Cascade Mountain is the pilot program. We have similar facilities in Montana, Colorado, Alaska, and the Appalachians. Each site maintains a breeding population of 12 to 20 subjects with regular food supply management. Food supply management, I repeated numbly. Problematic personnel, whistleblowers, investigative journalists, political dissidents, anyone whose disappearance serves the dual purpose of eliminating security risks and providing behavioral enrichment for our subjects. Harrison consulted his watch. Over the past 3 years, we've successfully processed over 300 individuals through the various sites. Elena was trembling with rage. You're talking about mass murder. I'm talking about species optimization. Every civilization eventually reaches a point where it must choose between stagnation and evolution. We chose evolution. The lodge door exploded inward, and David stumbled through, blood streaming from multiple wounds. The perimeter's fallen, he gasped. Darwin's subjects have overrun the facility. Marcus is dead. Harrison nodded as if receiving expected news. Excellent. The subject's assault provides perfect justification for chemical deployment. No survivors to question, no evidence to investigate. David, Eleanor said urgently, the chemical deployment system, were you able to disable it? Partially. I managed to hack into the control system before the subjects found me. David collapsed against the wall, fighting to stay conscious. The system has multiple redundancies, but I introduced a virus that should corrupt the targeting protocols. Harrison's composure cracked slightly. What kind of virus? The kind that redirects deployment coordinates. David managed a bloody smile. Instead of saturating the entire mountain range, your chemical weapons are now targeting a much smaller area. What area? This building. Harrison dove for his remote control, but Elena was faster. Her shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him away from the device. I lunged forward and grabbed the remote, trying to understand its controls, while Harrison writhed on the floor. "The abort sequence," David said weakly. "Red button, then the Colonel's authorization code." "What's the authorization code?" I demanded, pointing Elena's gun at Harrison. "Go to hell." Through the window, I could see Darwin's subjects moving through the chemical fog without apparent effect. They were wearing improvised gas masks and protective clothing, suggesting they'd learned to adapt to chemical weapons. "They're immune," Elena whispered. "Not immune," Harrison said through gritted teeth. "Resistant. We built chemical resistance into the enhancement protocol. Can't have super soldiers who can be taken down by enemy gas attacks." The implications were staggering. Harrison's own chemical weapons were useless against the creatures he'd created, but they would kill every unenhanced human in the area. "The authorization code," I repeated, pressing the gun against Harrison's head. "Even if I gave it to you, the system is hardened against tampering. David's virus might have corrupted targeting, but it won't stop the deployment." David coughed up blood. "Actually, it will, but only if we can input 2 senior authorization codes simultaneously." "I'm the only senior officer here." "No," David said. "Marcus gave me his codes before he died. But we need both codes input within 30 seconds of each other, or the system locks down permanently." Elena grabbed Harrison's injured arm and twisted. He screamed, but still refused to talk. "Colonel," I said, "in about 3 minutes, this building is going to be saturated with chemical weapons. You're not wearing protective gear, and you're not enhanced. You're going to die, just like the rest of us. The chemical agent is designed to be non-persistent. I have antidotes." "Where?" Harrison's eyes flicked toward a briefcase sitting on his desk. Elena moved to open it and found medical supplies, including what looked like pre-loaded syringes. "Antidotes for how many people?" Elena asked. 2 doses. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made us all freeze. Heavy footsteps, moving with predatory precision. The Darwin subjects had entered the lodge. "Code now, or we all die together," I said. Harrison looked at the door, then at the chemical fog visible through the windows, then at the briefcase with its limited antidotes. "Alpha 77 Delta 99 Black," he said quickly. David was already inputting Marcus's codes into a handheld device he'd pulled from his pack. "Got it. Harrison's codes, now." I input Harrison's authorization sequence into the remote control. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the device beeped, and through the window I could see the drones beginning to change direction. "Did it work?" Elena asked. David checked his device. "The chemical deployment has been aborted, but the drones are returning to base positions. The chemical agent already deployed will dissipate in about 10 minutes. The footsteps in the hallway had stopped right outside our door. Through the crack under the door, I could see shadows moving, multiple figures, coordinating their approach. "They're waiting," Elena whispered. "For what?" Harrison laughed weakly. "For the chemical agent to clear. Darwin subjects are intelligent enough to understand that even with their resistance, prolonged exposure to concentrated chemical weapons can be dangerous. So we're trapped here until the air clears, and then they come in to finish us off. Unless..." David struggled to his feet. "The emergency beacon. If we can activate the congressional alert system, it will bring in military assets that Harrison can't control." "I thought you needed 2 authorization codes for that too." "Not anymore. Harrison's codes are now in the system. I can trigger Code Black unilaterally." David pulled out another device and began inputting commands. Harrison tried to protest, but Elena kicked his wounded shoulder and he collapsed back into unconsciousness. "Code Black activation requires immediate military response," David explained as he worked. "Congressional notification, special operations deployment, and media attention. Even if we don't survive, the story will come out." The device beeped confirmation. "Signal sent. Congressional alert is active. Military response teams are en route." Through the walls, we could hear the Darwin subjects moving through the lodge, systematically clearing rooms. They were being methodical, professional, using their military training to ensure no one escaped. "How long until military response arrives?" Elena asked. 20 minutes minimum, probably longer." The footsteps outside our door resumed. Slow, deliberate, patient. The Darwin subjects knew we were trapped and weren't in any hurry. Elena moved to the window and looked out at the clearing chemical fog. "There," she said. "Emergency cache bunker David showed us yesterday. If we can reach it, We might be able to hold out until the cavalry arrives. That's 50 yards of open ground, through clearing chemical weapons and patrolled by enhanced predators with military training, I added. David checked his watch. Chemical concentration should be sub-lethal in about 3 minutes, and the Darwin subjects will probably wait for complete dissipation before moving. Probably isn't good enough. It's the only chance we have. As if to punctuate his words, something heavy hit the door. Then again, the Darwin subjects had apparently decided to test our defenses. Elena grabbed the briefcase with Harrison's antidotes. 2 doses, 3 people. Elena and Morrison take them, David said immediately. I'm not going to make it anyway. The door began to splinter under repeated impacts. Through the cracks I could see glimpses of enhanced musculature and modified gear. The Darwin subjects had equipped themselves with tactical equipment scavenged from the facility's armory. David's right, Elena said. We need to move now while we still can. I looked at David, bleeding and barely able to stand. Then at Elena, determined to survive and expose the truth. Then at Harrison, unconscious and responsible for hundreds of murders. The door gave way with a crash of splintering wood. Alliance formation, reaction to knowledge. The first Darwin subject through the door moved with inhuman fluidity, its enhanced musculature clearly visible beneath tactical gear scavenged from the facility's armory. What had once been human was now something else entirely. Predatory intelligence burning behind eyes that tracked our movements with predatory precision. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. It spoke in that careful, learned cadence, calling to its pack members. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She put 3 round center mass into the creature, which staggered but didn't fall. Enhanced bone density and muscle structure, they were built to absorb damage that would drop normal humans. "Window!" I shouted, grabbing one of Harrison's antidote syringes. David was already moving, surprisingly fast for someone losing as much blood as he was. Elena shattered the window with her rifle butt, and we tumbled through into the chemical fog outside. The antidote hit my system like liquid fire, burning through my veins as it neutralized the chemical agent. Elena injected herself as we ran, leaving David to face the fog with only adrenaline and determination. "David, you need—" Elena started. "Keep moving!" David cut her off, firing back at the window as more Darwin subjects appeared. "Cache bunker, 50 yards northeast." We sprinted across the open ground while Darwin subjects poured from the lodge behind us. The chemical fog was clearing rapidly, but traces still burned my lungs despite the antidote. David, running without protection, was already showing signs of chemical exposure. Labored breathing, stumbling steps, skin starting to redden. The emergency cache bunker appeared through the fog like salvation. A concrete entrance built into the hillside, designed to withstand everything from natural disasters to enemy attack. David produced the access key, and we dove inside, just as automatic weapons fire erupted from our pursuers. Inside the bunker, David immediately began sealing blast doors while Elena and I inventoried our supplies. Military-grade communications equipment, weapons, medical supplies, and enough food and water for extended operations. "How long can we hold out here?" Elena asked, checking the door's integrity as impacts from outside rattled the structure. "Indefinitely, if the power holds," David replied, but his voice was weak from chemical exposure. "These bunkers are designed for special operations teams operating in hostile territory." I activated the communication system and immediately heard military chatter. Helicopter squadrons, special operations teams, and congressional oversight personnel all responding to David's code black alert. "Cascade Base, this is Colonel Patricia Wells, Congressional Oversight. Please respond with situation report." I keyed the microphone. "Colonel Wells, this is Jake Morrison, surviving personnel from Cascade Mountain Facility. We have a code black situation with multiple civilian casualties and hostile enhanced subjects." "Enhanced subjects? Explain." Elena took the microphone. "Ma'am, this is Elena Vasquez, former Darwin Project researcher. We have 12 to 15 enhanced soldiers with hostile intentions, civilian casualties in excess of 40 personnel, and evidence of systematic human rights violations." The radio went silent for several long moments. "Dr. Vasquez," came the reply, "you're supposed to be dead. Your personnel file shows you died in a laboratory accident 18 months ago." Elena looked at me with grim satisfaction. Negative, Colonel. I've been working undercover to document human rights violations and illegal human experimentation. I have extensive evidence of government-sponsored murder, disguised as a hunting guide operation. David was setting up additional communication equipment despite his deteriorating condition. Getting you a secure uplink to congressional oversight, he said. Whatever you're going to reveal, better do it fast. Through the bunker's periscope system, I could see Darwin subjects systematically searching the area around our position. They moved with military precision, using hand signals and coordinated search patterns, but more importantly, they were clearly communicating with each other using sophisticated non-verbal methods. Eleanor, I said, you told the Colonel you were former Darwin Project research. What did you mean? Elena was connecting what looked like a portable hard drive to the communication system. I was Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiology specialist on the original Darwin enhancement team. When I discovered what Harrison was really doing, I faked my death and went underground to gather evidence. What evidence? Everything. Subject profiles, enhancement procedures, mortality rates, disposal methods for failed subjects, and most importantly, documentation of the breeding program's real objectives. She activated the data upload. I've been documenting systematic murder for 18 months, Morrison. Every guide who died, every test subject who was eliminated, every cover-up Harrison orchestrated. It's all here. David looked up from his equipment. You're uploading classified material to congressional oversight. I'm uploading evidence of crimes against humanity to the appropriate authorities. Elena's voice was steady with conviction. Harrison's program has murdered over 300 people across 5 states. The breeding populations he's established represent a clear and present danger to civilian populations. The radio crackled back to life. Dr. Vasquez, we're receiving your data stream. Initial analysis confirms multiple violations of federal law, military regulations, and international human rights treaties. Colonel Wells, I said, we need immediate extraction. We're currently trapped in an emergency bunker surrounded by hostile enhanced subjects. Copy that. Special operations teams are en route, ETA 15 minutes. Be advised, we're also receiving reports of similar incidents at facilities in Montana and Colorado. Elena and I exchanged glances. Harrison's network was collapsing across multiple sites. Colonel, Elena said, you need to understand that the enhanced subjects are not the primary threat. The real threat is the systematic program that created them and the people who are planning to expand it. David was monitoring external security feeds. We've got bigger problems. The Darwin subjects aren't just searching, they're setting up defensive positions. They know military extraction is coming. Through the periscope, I could see he was right. The creatures had established overlapping fields of fire, fortified positions, and escape routes. They were preparing for a military engagement using their retained tactical training. They're going to ambush the extraction team, I said. Elena keyed the radio. Colonel Wells, be advised that enhanced subjects retain military tactical training and are currently establishing ambush positions around our location. Recommend extreme caution for extraction teams. Copy. We're adjusting approach vectors and bringing additional firepower. David suddenly stiffened, listening to something on his headset. We have a problem. I'm picking up radio chatter from the Darwin subjects. They're using military frequencies and encryption protocols. What are they saying? They're coordinating with other sites. Montana and Colorado populations are mobilizing to provide reinforcement. David looked up at us with haunted eyes. Morrison, we're not dealing with an isolated containment failure. This is coordinated resistance from multiple enhanced populations. The implications hit me like a physical blow. How many subjects are we talking about? If all sites have similar populations, potentially 60 to 80 enhanced individuals with military training and coordination capabilities. Elena was pale. Harrison didn't just create isolated breeding populations. He created a network of enhanced predators capable of coordinated military action. The radio crackled with urgent updates. All units be advised, we have reports of enhanced subject activity at Darwin facilities across 3 states. This is now a multi-state emergency response. David's equipment began detecting movement on multiple frequencies. They're not just communicating with each other, They're intercepting our military communications and adapting their tactics in real time. Colonel Wells, I said urgently, the enhanced subjects have access to military communication protocols and are coordinating across multiple states. This is not a containment operation. This is active warfare against enhanced human populations. Copy that. Pentagon is now treating this as a domestic terrorism incident with military assets, full authorization for lethal force against enhanced subjects. Elena grabbed my arm. Morrison, we need to get out of here before this becomes a war zone. Once the military starts treating Darwin subjects as enemy combatants, anyone in the area becomes acceptable casualties. David was monitoring external feeds. Extraction team is approaching, but Darwin subjects are moving to intercept. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this entire area becomes a battlefield. Through the communications equipment, we could hear multiple military units coordinating response to what was now being called Darwin Uprising, enhanced subjects from multiple facilities apparently working together to resist termination. Eleanor, I said, your evidence, is it enough to prosecute Harrison and expose the program? It's enough to bring down everyone involved, from Harrison up to cabinet-level officials who authorized the program. Eleanor checked her weapon and prepared for extraction, but only if we survive long enough to testify. David struggled to his feet, chemical exposure taking its toll. There's something else. My hack into Harrison's system revealed communication logs between Darwin sites. They're not just coordinating defense, they're planning expansion. What kind of expansion? Recruitment. They're planning to capture and enhance additional subjects using equipment from the facilities they've overrun. The sound of helicopters approaching, mixed with automatic weapons fire from outside. The battle for Cascade Mountain facility was beginning, but it was no longer about containment. It was about preventing an enhanced human uprising from spreading across the entire country. Eleanor, I said as we prepared to make our run for extraction, what happens if they succeed? If the Darwin subjects establish permanent populations and continue expanding? Elena's response chilled me more than the mountain air. Then Harrison gets exactly what he wanted, an enhanced human species that views us as prey and has the military capability to hunt us systematically. The bunker door exploded inward under heavy weapons fire. Through the smoke and debris, enhanced figures moved with predatory grace toward our position. Our time for planning was over. Now we had to survive long enough to ensure the truth reached the outside world. Action and confrontation. Plan execution. The Darwin subject that breached our bunker moved with terrifying efficiency, its enhanced reflexes allowing it to dodge Elena's first shots while closing the distance between us. I put my entire magazine into its center mass, watching rounds impact without slowing its advance. Neck shots, Eleanor screamed, adjusting her aim. Spinal disruption is the only thing that drops them. Her next 3 rounds caught the creature at the base of its skull. It dropped instantly, but I could already hear more movement in the entrance tunnel. David was at the communication console, blood streaming from chemical burns, but still coordinating with the incoming extraction team. Bravo team, this is Cache 7. We're under direct assault, need immediate support at our position. Copy Cache 7, inbound in 90 seconds. Can you reach the extraction point? David looked at the tactical display showing Darwin's subject positions around our bunker. Negative. We're surrounded by at least 8 enhanced hostiles with military coordination. Elena was uploading the last of her evidence files while keeping watch on the entrance. Data upload is at 96%. If we can hold for 2 more minutes, everything gets transmitted to congressional oversight. Another explosion rocked the bunker as Darwin subjects used military-grade explosives to breach additional access points. These weren't just enhanced predators anymore. They were conducting coordinated military operations using equipment they'd captured from overrun facilities. They're tunneling through the ventilation system, I said, hearing movement above us. David pulled out what looked like a military-grade tablet and began inputting commands. I'm triggering the bunker's self-destruct protocol. We have 30 seconds to evacuate before this entire section collapses. Self-destruct? This is a shelter, not a weapon depot. Emergency protocol for preventing classified material from falling into enemy hands, David replied, grabbing essential equipment. Elena, is the upload complete? 100%. Congressional oversight has everything. Subject profiles, enhancement procedures, murder documentation, facility locations, and Harrison's breeding program objectives. Elena shouldered her pack. The truth is out there now. The bunker's automated systems began announcing evacuation warnings as David armed the demolition charges built into the structure's foundation. Outside, I could hear the distinctive sound of military helicopters engaging targets with heavy weapons. Extraction point is 50 meters northeast, David said, consulting his tablet. But we'll be running through active combat between Darwin subjects and special operations teams. Elena checked her weapon. Better than being buried alive when this place explodes. We moved toward the secondary exit as the bunker's systems counted down from 20 seconds. David was struggling to keep up, chemical exposure and blood loss taking their toll, but he refused assistance. "Morrison," he said as we reached the exit, "if I don't make it to extraction, you need to know something about Harrison's network. Save it for the debrief. There's no time." David grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Harrison isn't the top of the chain. He reports to someone called Director Prometheus. If Harrison dies today, Prometheus will just activate backup protocols and continue the program." Before I could respond, the exit door exploded outward under automatic weapons fire. Special operations soldiers in full combat gear were advancing through the forest, engaging Darwin subjects in running firefights. "Friendly personnel exiting Cache 7, Elena shouted into her radio. "3 survivors requiring immediate extraction." A voice crackled back. "Copy. Bravo team leader confirms visual on friendlies. Move to extraction point Alpha, 200 meters east of your position." The bunker's demolition charges detonated behind us, collapsing the entire structure in a controlled implosion that sent debris flying in all directions. The explosion also created a smoke screen that temporarily concealed our movement. We ran through a forest that had become a war zone. Darwin subjects moved through the trees with supernatural speed and coordination, using hit-and-run tactics against military forces that were learning to adapt to fighting enhanced human opponents. "Sniper!" Eleanor shouted, diving for cover as high-velocity rounds sparked off rocks near our position. I looked up to see a Darwin subject positioned in a tree canopy nearly 300 meters away, using a military sniper rifle with apparent expert proficiency. The creature's enhanced vision and steady aim made it a devastating long-range threat. Her military helicopter gunship resolved the problem by putting a 20mm cannon burst into the sniper's tree, but not before the creature managed to wound one of our extraction team members. "David's hit," Elena said, kneeling beside him where he'd collapsed. The sniper round had caught David in the chest, and blood was foaming from his mouth. Chemical exposure combined with the gunshot wound was rapidly proving fatal. "Keep moving," David gasped. "Harrison, Prometheus, stop them." Elena tried to lift him, but David pushed her away. "Take this," he said, pulling a data drive from his pack. "Everything I pulled from Harrison's system. Names, locations, funding sources, all of it. David, we're not leaving you." "Yes, you are." David pulled out a grenade and held it ready. "I'll buy you time to reach extraction." Before we could argue, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions. Darwin subjects were converging on our position, having identified us as high-value targets. "Go!" David shouted, and we ran. Behind us, I heard David's grenade detonate, followed by inhuman screams of rage and pain. He'd taken at least one Darwin subject with him, maybe more. The extraction point was a clearing where 2 Black Hawk helicopters waited under heavy guard from special operations teams. As we approached, I could see congressional oversight personnel setting up communication equipment. Elena's evidence upload was already being analyzed at the highest levels of government. Dr. Vasquez, a woman in military uniform, approached us. "Colonel Patricia Wells, Congressional Oversight. We need immediate debriefing on the Darwin program." "Colonel," Elena gasped, exhausted from our escape, "the immediate priority is preventing expansion to other sites. The Darwin subjects are coordinating across multiple facilities." Colonel Wells led us toward one of the helicopters. "We're aware. Pentagon has deployed special operations teams to facilities in Montana, Colorado, Alaska, and the Appalachians. But Dr. Vasquez, your evidence indicates this program has government authorization at cabinet level." Director Prometheus, I said, remembering David's warning. Harrison reported to someone called Director Prometheus. If Harrison's dead, Prometheus will activate backup protocols. Colonel Wells stopped walking. Did you say Prometheus? Yes. Why? Because Director Prometheus is Secretary of Defense Margaret Thompson. She's currently in a classified briefing with the President about the Darwin situation. The implications hit like a physical blow. The person responsible for overseeing the government's response to the Darwin uprising was the same person who had authorized the program in the first place. Elena grabbed Colonel Wells's arm. You have to stop that briefing. Thompson will manipulate the situation to protect the program and eliminate witnesses. Dr. Vasquez, you're accusing the Secretary of Defense of treason and mass murder. I'm accusing Director Prometheus of crimes against humanity. And if she's briefing the President right now, she's probably convincing him that the Darwin uprising justifies expansion of the enhancement program rather than its termination. Through the helicopter's communication system, we could hear reports from other Darwin facilities. Montana was under siege, Colorado had gone dark completely, and Alaska was reporting coordinated enhanced subject resistance with military capabilities. Colonel, I said urgently, what if this was always the plan? What if the uprising isn't a containment failure but a deliberately triggered event designed to justify expanding the program nationwide? Colonel Wells was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. You're suggesting that Secretary Thompson deliberately caused a crisis to create justification for enhanced soldier deployment in domestic security operations. I'm suggesting that Director Prometheus just gave the President a perfect reason to authorize Darwin-enhanced soldiers for homeland security, counter-terrorism, and civil unrest management, Elena replied. And anyone who can prove the program's real history is being systematically eliminated. The helicopter lifted off as automatic weapons fire erupted from the forest below. Darwin subjects were making a final coordinated assault on the extraction point, but we were already climbing away from their reach. Through the aircraft's windows, I could see the devastation below. A facility reduced to burning ruins, special operations teams still engaged in firefights with enhanced subjects, and evidence of a program that had turned human beings into predatory weapons. Colonel Wells, Eleanor said over the helicopter's noise, how long before we reach Washington? 3 hours? Why? Because in 3 hours, Secretary Thompson will have convinced the President to authorize nationwide deployment of enhanced soldiers for domestic security operations. And once that happens, the Darwin program won't be a secret conspiracy anymore. It'll be official government policy, I finished. Colonel Wells activated the helicopter's secure communication system. This is Congressional Oversight Team Alpha. I need immediate direct communication with the President. We have intelligence indicating an imminent threat to national security from within the cabinet level. As we flew toward Washington, the radio continued reporting Darwin facility situations across the country. What had started as a containment breach at one mountain facility was rapidly becoming a nationwide crisis that could fundamentally change the relationship between the government and its citizens. And somewhere in the White House, Secretary of Defense Thompson was probably explaining to the President why enhanced soldiers were the solution to America's security problems. Elena looked out at the landscape below and spoke the words that chilled me more than the mountain cold. Morrison, what if we're already too late? What if the uprising was never meant to be contained? I thought about Harrison's calm acceptance of death, the coordination between Darwin facilities, and the systematic elimination of witnesses. We weren't just racing against time to expose a conspiracy. We were racing to prevent the official transformation of the United States government into something that viewed its own citizens as potential prey. Consequences, escape, and separation. The helicopter began shuddering violently as we approached Washington airspace, red warning lights flooding the cabin. Colonel Wells was shouting into her headset, but I couldn't hear her words over the engine noise and what sounded like structural damage. What's happening? Elena yelled. Someone's jamming our communications and navigation systems, Wells replied. We're being forced to land at Andrews Air Force Base instead of the Pentagon. Through the window, I could see military aircraft moving to intercept us, F-16s in formation that looked more like an escort than protection. The helicopter was being diverted, not guided to safety. Colonel, I shouted, This isn't standard procedure, is it? Wells' expression was grim. No. Someone with significant authority is controlling our approach. As we descended toward Andrews, I could see the base was under heightened security. Military vehicles, armed personnel, and what looked like a media blackout zone. Whatever was happening, it was being contained at the highest levels. The helicopter touched down in a secured hangar where armed guards immediately surrounded us. But these weren't standard military personnel. Their equipment and bearings suggested special operations, and their uniforms bore insignia I didn't recognize. "Dr. Vasquez, Mr. Morrison," a familiar voice called from the hangar entrance. Colonel Harrison walked toward us, his arm in a sling but very much alive. Behind him stood a woman in civilian clothes who radiated authority, mid-50s, steel-gray hair, and eyes that evaluated threats with military precision. "Secretary Thompson," Colonel Wells said, saluting. "I wasn't expecting—" "Colonel Wells, you and your team are hereby relieved of oversight responsibilities for the Darwin situation," Thompson interrupted. "This matter has been classified above your clearance level." Elena stepped forward. "Secretary Thompson, or should I say Director Prometheus, we have extensive evidence of your involvement in systematic murder and illegal human experimentation." Thompson's expression didn't change. "Doctor Vasquez, you've been officially declared dead for 18 months. Dead people can't provide testimony. The evidence has already been uploaded to congressional oversight. Evidence that has been classified as national security material and sealed under presidential authority," Thompson replied. "Your upload has been quarantined pending security review." Colonel Wells stepped between us and Thompson. "Ma'am, with respect, congressional oversight has constitutional authority. Colonel, you have two choices. Accept reassignment to a classified project with appropriate compensation and security clearance, or face court-martial for mishandling classified national security material." I could see Wells calculating her options. Congressional oversight versus the Secretary of Defense, backed by presidential authority. In a direct power struggle, Thompson held all the cards. "What about Morrison and Dr. Vasquez?" Wells asked. "They're assets with valuable knowledge of Darwin subject behavior and capabilities. They'll be debriefed and integrated into the expanded program." "Expanded program?" Eleanor demanded. Harrison stepped forward. "Dr. Vasquez, the events at the Darwin facilities have provided invaluable data on enhanced subject coordination and military capabilities. Rather than terminate the program, we're expanding it." "You're insane. Those creatures are murdering machines." "Those creatures are the future of American military superiority," Thompson interrupted. "The Darwin subjects' performance during the facility incidents exceeded every metric we established. Enhanced coordination, tactical innovation, adaptive behavior, they represent the next evolution of military capability." Thompson activated a wall display showing what looked like deployment maps of major American cities. The Darwin uprising demonstrated the inadequacy of conventional military response to enhanced threats. The solution isn't to eliminate enhanced soldiers, it's to create more of them under proper government control. "Proper control?" I said. "You lost control of every Darwin subject you created." "We lost control of the prototypes," Harrison corrected. "The new generation will incorporate lessons learned from the facility incidents. Improved psychological conditioning, enhanced loyalty programming, and fail-safe termination protocols." Elena was staring at the deployment maps with growing horror. "You're planning to deploy enhanced soldiers in American cities for domestic security operations." "We're planning to deploy enhanced soldiers wherever American security interests require capabilities beyond conventional military assets," Thompson replied. "Foreign operations, counter-terrorism, border security, and yes, domestic threats that conventional forces can't handle." Colonel Wells was reading from a tablet, her face pale. "The President has authorized Operation Darwin Shield, nationwide deployment of enhanced security assets for homeland protection. Effective immediately," Thompson confirmed. "The Darwin facilities will be rebuilt as training centers for enhanced soldier production. Recruitment will focus on military veterans with appropriate psychological profiles and financial motivations." The implications hit me like physical blows. They weren't shutting down the program, they were franchising it. "How many?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Initial deployment calls for 500 enhanced soldiers across 12 facilities," Harrison replied. Full operational capacity should reach 2,000 enhanced assets within 18 months. And the existing Darwin subjects, the ones who are supposedly uncontrollable? Thompson smiled coldly. The existing subjects will serve as training opposition for new recruits. Nothing teaches enhanced soldiers how to fight enhanced opponents like actual combat experience. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Morrison, they're going to use the mountain creatures as gladiator training for new enhanced soldiers. They're turning the entire program into a military academy for creating super predators. Dr. Vasquez, Thompson said, you have extensive experience with enhanced subject psychology and behavior. Your knowledge would be invaluable in developing improved conditioning protocols. I'd rather die than help you create more monsters. That can be arranged. Thompson's tone was conversational. However, we'd prefer your cooperation. The alternative is permanent assignment to a Darwin training facility as a test subject for enhanced soldier development. The threat was clear. Help create enhanced soldiers or become prey for them. Colonel Wells was still reading her orders. I'm being reassigned to Darwin Shield oversight. Full security clearance, significant salary increase, and housing at a classified facility. And if you refuse? I asked. Wells looked at Thompson, then at Harrison, then back at her tablet. Court-martial, imprisonment for mishandling classified material, and potential charges under the Espionage Act. Elena whispered to me. They're not just covering up the conspiracy, they're forcing everyone with knowledge to become part of it. Mr. Morrison, Thompson said, your military background and recent experience with Darwin subjects make you an ideal candidate for enhanced soldier recruitment. The psychological profile indicates you'd respond well to the enhancement process. You want to turn me into one of those things? We want to offer you the opportunity to become humanity's next evolutionary step, enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and sensory capabilities. You'd retain your human intelligence and personality while gaining superhuman physical abilities. Harrison activated another display showing before and after profiles of enhancement candidates. The new process incorporates psychological stabilization protocols that maintain human cognitive function while optimizing predatory capabilities. What about the existing subjects, the ones in the mountains? They serve as proof of concept and training opposition. Eventually, they'll be retired once their usefulness ends. Retired? Terminated, Elena said flatly. Once they've trained enough new enhanced soldiers, Thompson will eliminate the original subjects to remove evidence of the program's failures. Thompson checked her watch. Dr. Vasquez, Mr. Morrison, you have 1 hour to decide. Join Darwin Shield as voluntary participants or be processed as involuntary assets. Involuntary assets? Enhanced soldier candidates who require additional psychological conditioning to ensure loyalty and cooperation, Harrison explained. The process is more intensive but equally effective. Elena looked at me with desperation. Morrison, if we agree to cooperate, we might be able to sabotage the program from inside. And if we refuse, they turn us into enhanced soldiers anyway, but without our consent or cooperation. Thompson was already walking toward the hangar exit. 1 hour. Security personnel will escort you to quarters where you can consider your options. As armed guards surrounded us, I realized we'd escaped the Darwin subjects only to fall into the hands of their creators. The conspiracy wasn't being exposed, it was being legitimized and expanded. Elena grabbed my hand as we were separated into different vehicles. Morrison, remember everything we've learned. No matter what they do to us, someone has to survive to tell the truth. Eleanor, if they enhance me, if they break my conditioning, promise me you'll find a way to stop this. The vehicle doors slammed shut, separating us. Through the window, I watched Elena's transport drive toward one section of the base, while mine headed in a different direction. In 1 hour, I'd have to choose between becoming a monster voluntarily or having the choice made for me. But Elena was right, someone had to survive with the truth. Someone had to find a way to expose what Darwin Shield really represented. The systematic transformation of American military assets into enhanced predators designed to hunt the very citizens they were supposed to protect. As my transport approached what looked like a medical facility, I began planning the most important mission of my life, staying human long enough to prevent America from becoming a hunting preserve for government-created monsters. The only question was whether I had the strength to resist enhancement long enough to find a way to destroy the program from within, or whether I'd become another Darwin subject, hunting humans for the entertainment and security of a government that viewed its own citizens as acceptable casualties in the pursuit of military superiority. Resolution, conclusion, and reflection. 6 months later, classified Congressional Hearing Room, Washington, D.C. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I sat at the witness table, my hands steady despite everything I'd endured. Across from me, a panel of senators and congressional representatives listened with expressions ranging from horror to disbelief as I recounted the events at Cascade Mountain. "Mr. Morrison," Senator Patricia Reynolds said, leaning forward, "you're testifying that the Darwin Shield program was terminated following your infiltration and sabotage efforts." "Yes, ma'am. Elena Vasquez and I were able to corrupt the enhancement protocols from within the program. We introduced psychological conditioning failures that caused new subjects to retain full human empathy and moral reasoning. It was a careful way of describing what had actually happened. Elena and I had spent 4 months pretending to cooperate with Darwin Shield while systematically sabotaging the enhancement process. Every new subject we helped create retained their humanity, instead of becoming predatory weapons." "And Secretary Thompson's current status?" "Secretary Thompson died in what was classified as a helicopter accident during a facility inspection. Her death occurred 2 weeks after enhanced subjects began refusing orders and protecting test subjects instead of hunting them." Another careful euphemism. Thompson had died when enhanced soldiers she thought were under her control turned on their creators. Elena's psychological programming modifications had worked better than we'd hoped. Senator James Mitchell consulted his notes. "Mr. Morrison, what happened to the original Darwin subjects from the mountain facilities?" "Most were eliminated during military containment operations. However, intelligence suggests that some subjects escaped into remote wilderness areas where they remain at large." That was the truth, though not the complete truth. 3 Darwin subjects had escaped the mountain facility before the military operations began. They'd learned enough about human behavior to disappear completely, and occasionally I received reports of unusual predatory activity in national forests across the Pacific Northwest. "And Dr. Elena Vasquez?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Dr. Vasquez disappeared during the final containment operations. Her status is unknown." Elena hadn't disappeared. She'd been captured during our final sabotage mission and subjected to involuntary enhancement. But the psychological conditioning we'd designed worked on her too. She retained her humanity even after enhancement. The problem was that enhanced humans with full empathy and moral reasoning couldn't psychologically tolerate what they'd become. Elena was alive, but she was living in a specialized facility for enhanced individuals who couldn't function in normal society. The enhancement process was irreversible, and even with her humanity intact, she was no longer entirely human. "Mr. Morrison," Senator Reynolds continued, "in your professional opinion, what safeguards should be implemented to prevent similar programs in the future? Congressional oversight of all military enhancement research, mandatory psychological evaluation of program leadership, and absolute prohibition on using human subjects without fully informed consent." I met her eyes directly. "Most importantly, any research that could create beings capable of viewing humans as prey should be classified as crimes against humanity and banned under international treaty. Do you believe programs like Darwin Shield could be implemented safely with proper oversight?" I thought about Elena, confined to a facility because her enhanced capabilities made normal human interaction impossible. I thought about the Darwin subjects still loose in the wilderness, forever changed and forever dangerous. I thought about Tommy's body and David's sacrifice and the memorial stone with 11 names. No, ma'am. The fundamental premise is flawed. You cannot enhance human beings beyond human limitations without sacrificing essential human qualities. Enhanced strength and speed require enhanced aggression. Enhanced sensory capabilities require predatory focus. Enhanced coordination requires pack mentality that supersedes individual moral reasoning. You're saying that superhuman enhancement is inherently incompatible with human nature. I'm saying that every attempt to create enhanced human beings has resulted in creating enhanced predators. The technology to improve human physical capabilities exists, but the wisdom to use it safely does not. Senator Mitchell leaned back in his chair. Mr. Morrison, what are you doing now? I work with the Veterans Administration, providing counseling and support for military personnel dealing with PTSD and combat trauma. I also consult with congressional oversight committees on military research programs that might pose civilian risks. It was satisfying work helping other veterans avoid the desperate situations that had led me to Cascade Mountain. But every night I dreamed about enhanced figures moving through dark forests, and I wondered if the 3 escaped Darwin subjects were adapting, learning, potentially reproducing. Any final thoughts for this committee? I looked at each senator in turn, knowing that some of them had probably known about Darwin's Shield and chosen to stay silent until the scandal broke. The desire to create perfect soldiers is as old as warfare itself. But perfection in combat means optimization for killing, and humans optimized for killing cease to be human in any meaningful sense. I paused. We learned that lesson at a cost of over 300 lives. I hope we never forget it enough to repeat the experiment. 3 hours later, Arlington Cemetery. I stood before David Kowalski's headstone, reading the inscription that identified him only as Sergeant David Kowalski, United States Army, died in service to his country. No mention of Darwin's Shield, no acknowledgement of his sacrifice to expose the truth. Jake. I turned to find a woman approaching across the cemetery grounds, mid-30s, athletic build, moving with careful precision that suggested enhanced capabilities under strict control. Elena. She looked human, but I could see the changes: slightly enlarged muscle structure, eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision, reflexes that responded to stimuli faster than human normal. The enhancement process had worked perfectly. Too perfectly. How are you? I asked. Surviving. The facility is comfortable. I have work to do. Research that might help other enhanced individuals adapt to civilian life. Eleanor's voice was carefully modulated, as if she was concentrating on sounding human. How's the congressional testimony going? Finished today. Darwin's Shield is officially terminated. All research facilities are closed, and enhanced human research is banned under federal law. And unofficially, I met her enhanced eyes, seeing intelligence that was still recognizably Eleanor, but filtered through capabilities that no human should possess. There are rumors about research continuing under different names at private contractors. Nothing confirmed, but governments don't abandon weapons that work. They just transfer them to deniable assets. Elena nodded. I've been monitoring communications. At least 3 foreign governments have attempted to recruit former Darwin's Shield personnel. Are you stable? Functional? Human? Elena's smile was sad. I remember being human, Jake. I remember empathy and moral reasoning and emotional bonds. But I experience them differently now. It's like remembering a language you used to speak fluently, but can only partially understand. We walked together toward the cemetery entrance, Eleanor moving with the fluid grace that marked all enhanced individuals. Do you regret it? I asked. The choice to sabotage from within. No. Even if the cost was losing my humanity, preventing Darwin's Shield from creating thousands of enhanced predators was worth it. Elena paused at the cemetery gate. But Jake, you need to understand something. The 3 Darwin subjects who escaped the mountain aren't just surviving, they're adapting. Adapting how? They're learning to blend into human society. Enhanced individuals with predatory psychology but human-level intelligence can be very effective at mimicking normal behavior. Elena's expression was haunted. I've detected communication patterns that suggest they're not just hiding, they're recruiting. Recruiting for what? Building a population. The enhancement process can be replicated with captured medical equipment and basic laboratory facilities. If they acquire enough resources and knowledge, the implications chilled me. Enhanced predators who could pass for human, building their own population without government oversight or control. Eleanor, are you in contact with them? Not directly, but enhanced individuals can sense each other at close range, biological recognition response built into the enhancement process. Eleanor's voice was carefully neutral. They know about me and they know I'm not aligned with their objectives. which are survival and expansion. They view unenhanced humans as a resource to be managed, not a population to be protected. Elena looked directly at me with eyes that were no longer entirely human. Jake, if they succeed in establishing a breeding population, humanity will face an evolutionary competitor that views us as prey. What can we do? You can do what you're already doing. Prevent government programs from creating more enhanced individuals. I can monitor and hopefully contain the existing threats. Elena's smile was genuinely warm despite everything. And we can hope that human ingenuity finds solutions faster than enhanced predators find victims. As Elena walked away, moving with inhuman grace toward a black SUV with government plates, I realized that our victory over Darwin's Shield was only the beginning. The enhanced individuals were still out there, some struggling to retain their humanity in government facilities, others adapting to predatory existence in the wilderness, and a few potentially building toward something that could threaten human civilization itself. I returned to my car and drove toward my apartment, knowing that tomorrow I'd continue my work helping veterans avoid the desperate choices that had led me to Cascade Mountain. But tonight, I'd sleep restlessly, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, enhanced human predators were learning to pass for people while planning humanity's replacement. The Darwin Shield program was terminated, but Charles Darwin's theories about survival of the fittest were still being tested in ways he never imagined, and I wasn't sure which species would prove most fit to survive. End of story. Author's note: the events described in this narrative are fictional. Any resemblance to actual military programs, government operations, or enhanced human research is purely coincidental. However, readers should be aware that the ethical questions raised about human enhancement research remain relevant to ongoing scientific and military development programs.